This Shabbat we deal with a failed society. Just 10 generations after the birth of the world had descended into decadence and disarray. God decides to destroy the world through a flood. Only the righteous Noah and his family and the species that he takes with him into the ark survive the flood. Noah emerges from the flood and makes the terrible mistake of planting a vineyard and drinking the wine to the extent that he finds himself in a drunken stupor, naked in his tent. One of his sons arrives at the scene, Cham. Cham responds by rushing to his brothers and saying, "Guess what? You cannot believe there's a scene. Come and see what's happening. Our father's lying naked in his tent." The other two sons, Shem and Yafet, the Torah describes in such great detail. They arrived at the scene and sensitively addressed the problem. They walked backwards, their faces turned away from their father. They did not see the nakedness of their father. They covered their father. Why would the Torah take so many words to describe their response? Because it's instructive. There's a message that is hidden between the words that describes how we ought to see negative failures, problems in others, and how we ought to address them. The Baal Shem Tov tells us that when we see a failure in somebody else, then there's an opportunity of using it as a mirror to view our own faults, to recognize that there's a place in myself that needs to be addressed, that I have simply seen in somebody else, to be able to recognize it in myself. And why didn't Hashem show it to me in myself? Because when it comes to my own failures and faults, there's denial. I don't see the fault in the first place. When I do, I justify. Sometimes I even claim credit for doing the things that are inappropriate in my life. But for somebody else, I immediately see it starkly. They have failed. And that, says the Baal Shem Tov, is the opportunity to see that failure in ourselves, to address the problem that is close to home. And maybe the reason that I've seen the problem in somebody else is to address it, is to deal with it, is to fix their problem. Maybe that's the reason I've seen the fault. So then the Yasser test is, what was my initial response? If my response was judgment, if I looked at somebody else failing and saying, "Tut, tut, tut, how could they behave in such a way?" If that's my response, to see the negativity of their deeds and to judge them, says the Baal Shem Tov, immediately stop and see it as a mirror. This is my opportunity to see the failure and fault in myself. If in fact the reason I saw it was to assist and to help, then I would not be standing in judgment. Then I wouldn't be seeing the nakedness. I wouldn't be seeing the failure and the fault. I would only be seeing the opportunity to assist and to help. The brothers, Shem and Yafet, walk backwards, their heads turned away. They do not see the nakedness. They are focused singularly on how do I resolve the problem that my father has. Then the reason I've seen it is to assist. But most times we see the stark failures in others without wanting to assist, but to judge and to be able to pass judgment on somebody else. Then the instruction to ourselves is to see ourselves growing and developing by looking into the mirror that I see in seeing somebody else's failure. Such a beautiful insight that comes to us just post the story of the Mabul, the flood and the destruction of the world. How do we look at the failures of others? And how do we always have the opportunity of addressing our own lives by looking at the way we look at other people's failures? And if in fact we are judging others, it's the opportunity to address the weakness in our own lives, much closer to home. It's about our own lives that need to be resolved. May we have a beautiful Shabbat. May the world be introduced to the character of Avraham Avinu, who comes in right at the end of this week's portion, because he has a message of purpose and meaning that defines us as Jews. Shabbat Shalom.